When Mike decided to rescue an abandoned puppy, he never imagined that, within just a few months, he'd discover it wasn't a dog at all. To keep the animal, he would have to completely change his life. Mike had just finished loading groceries into his car when something caught his eye. A truck was parked nearby, and on its back was a small cage. Inside, a tiny puppy sat silently, its sad, defeated expression pulling at Mike's heart immediately. But even in its sorrow, the pup was breathtaking. It had the fluffiest coat Mike had ever seen and a pair of soulful eyes that melted him on the spot. When the truck's owner returned, Mike lingered, curious to ask about the puppy. But what he learned next wasn't easy to hear. The man explained that the puppy had been abandoned near his farm. He and his workers had tried to chase it away, but it kept coming back. A highway ran right past the property, and it wasn't unusual for unwanted animals to be dumped nearby. They couldn't keep them all, but they did try to find them homes when they could. Unfortunately, this little pup had made the farmer furious. Clearly starving and too young to fend for himself, the puppy had followed the scent of food right into the chicken coop. The damage was brutal. Several chickens were killed, others died from the stress. For a struggling farmer, the loss was significant and deeply frustrating. Though he couldn't bring himself to hurt the pup, he had made up his mind to take it to the vet and ask for it to be euthanized at a low cost. Mike's chest tightened. The thought of such a beautiful, innocent animal being put down simply for trying to survive was too much. He had to do something. Without hesitation, he offered to take the puppy. He even said he'd pay, hoping the money could help the farmer recover some of his losses. In return, he'd gain a loyal companion, and maybe, in time, a best friend. The farmer agreed under one condition. He never wanted to see the dog on his land again. Mike gently picked the puppy up, and the little body relaxed into his arms. The poor thing had to be terrified, and Mike was relieved that he'd shown up just in time. Of course, he had no idea what to do with a puppy. He lived in a gardenless apartment, but he cleared some space and slowly a new rhythm began. He named him Lucky, and the bond they formed was instant. Mike couldn't tell whether it was because Lucky knew he'd been saved, or if there was something deeper, something rare, about their connection. But from the start, it felt like fate. Life with Lucky was pure joy, but he was no lazy lapdog. He needed to burn off his endless energy. If he didn't, he'd find other ways to stay busy, like stealing Mike's hats or curling up on his hoodies, which he quickly claimed as his own. Mike expected training to be a nightmare, especially on walks, but to his surprise, Lucky was calm and cooperative. He loved exploring the woods near their home and always followed Mike's lead. That is, until other dogs came into view. Then all bets were off. Lucky would absolutely lose his mind, desperate to play, even with dogs that wanted nothing to do with him. Still, it was adorable. Passers-by would often stop to compliment Mike on his puppy's friendliness and stunning appearance. But as time passed, a small issue became impossible to ignore. Lucky wouldn't stop growing. His sleek black coat grew thicker and shaggier, and he turned into an absolutely enormous animal. Most people were intimidated just looking at him, and their reactions made Mike start to wonder about Lucky's size. At first, he told himself it was normal for a wolf-dog mix, but deep down he was uneasy. What if something was wrong? What if this wasn't normal growth at all? Nervous but determined, Mike took Lucky to the vet. He needed answers. As soon as they walked in, the nurse gasped. She immediately ushered them into a separate room, worried Lucky might hurt another pet, or worse, a person. Mike didn't argue. He knew better, but he understood their fear. Lucky was only a few months old and already bigger than most full-grown large breeds. On walks, people would freeze when this giant ball of fluff tried to befriend their tiny dogs. Mike had long suspected that Lucky might not be a regular puppy. He believed the pup came from two purebred wolf dogs, but something still didn't feel right. And that day at the vet, everything changed. The doctor entered and chuckled softly when he saw Lucky's massive head resting sweetly on Mike's shoulder. One look, and you could tell the big guy adored his human. The good news? Lucky was perfectly healthy. The surprising news? He wasn't a dog. He was a wolf. Quick break. Before we continue, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us keep sharing amazing stories like this. Thank you. To be exact, Lucky was a pure Canadian black wolf, with no trace of dog in his bloodline. How he ended up abandoned near a farm remained a mystery. Maybe his pack left him behind. Maybe someone thought they could raise a wolf cub and panicked when reality hit. Whatever the case, His fate was now inseparable from Mike's, who had unknowingly raised a wild animal as his own. Shock didn't even begin to describe what Mike felt. Despite his true identity, Lucky had never shown a hint of aggression. Aside from his preference for meat over kibble, he had acted just like a loving, loyal dog. But now, Mike had to face the truth. He couldn't treat Lucky like a normal pet anymore. It wasn't bad news exactly, but it would definitely change things. The vet explained that Mike needed to report Lucky to the local wildlife authority. Keeping a wolf in a residential home was not something the law took lightly. Even if Lucky acted tame, he was still a wild animal. Mike lived in the city in a house with neighbors, kids, and pets. And Lucky, with his size and strength, couldn't stay in that environment forever. If Mike wanted to keep him, something had to give. A few days later, a wildlife inspector visited. His job was to determine whether Lucky needed to be removed, or if the bond between the man and his wolf could be preserved. The moment he saw them together, he understood. There was no denying their connection, and he made a quiet decision then and there. He would try everything he could to keep them together. The first step? Get Lucky out of the city limits. Because one thing was clear, keeping a full-grown wolf in a suburban backyard was not okay. Mike sold his home, liquidated his savings, and poured everything he had into buying a small piece of land, something far more suitable for raising a wolf. The inspector, despite never having handled a case quite like this, was doing his best to help. He explained that the law was very clear when it came to wild animals. Regular folks weren't allowed to keep them. If Mike wanted to keep Lucky, he would have to go above and beyond. Most people would have walked away, but not Mike. He loved that wolf like his own child. The mere thought of Lucky ending up in a shelter, or worse, being taken from him and losing the soft head scratches he adored, made Mike's stomach turn. The heartbreak wouldn't just be his. Lucky loved him too, deeply. Their bond ran too deep to ignore. The land gave Lucky space to run, roam, and play, but space wasn't enough. Mike had to build a secure enclosure that met strict standards, not just for Lucky's well-being, but to protect those who might live or pass nearby. There was still one massive hurdle in front of him. He had to be registered as an animal rescue expert to legally keep a wild creature. That meant proving he had the knowledge, the resources, and the facilities necessary to care for such an animal. It was a lot. Mike decided to share his journey online. He started uploading videos of Lucky, tiny as a pup, then growing into the majestic creature he'd become. Slowly, he revealed the truth to his audience. People were stunned. Not just that Lucky was a full wolf, but by the bond the two of them shared. The wolf played like a dog, often trying to nibble at Mike's hoodie strings or ears. Despite his size and the teeth that could cause real damage, he was always gentle with Mike. And if Mike scolded him, Lucky would immediately stop and lie down, like an oversized puppy who just wanted to be good. It was incredible to witness. But as the videos made their rounds online, something unexpected happened. The story went viral. Mike's family shared it, their friends shared it, and before long, people all over the world were watching this man and his wolf. Opinions were mixed. Some criticized him for adopting a puppy without knowing its origins. Others were shocked he hadn't realized sooner, and a few felt it was unfair to keep a wild animal, even if domesticated. But most people got it. They saw the love and commitment. They saw the care. And they rooted for Mike and Lucky. The audience grew, and quickly. Still, Mike had no time to enjoy the attention. The inspector returned and wasn't happy. The enclosure, while impressive, wasn't enough. Lucky needed more space. Mike had planned to let him roam free during the day, just like always. But to the inspector, that wasn't good enough. Everything had to meet legal standards. No exceptions. And then came the blow. Mike had only a few weeks to make the changes or Lucky would be taken. It didn't matter how obvious their bond was. The inspector's hands were tied. He admitted that, by law, he should have already removed the animal. But he didn't. He wanted to give them a chance. A slim one, but a chance. To Mike, though, it felt like the end of everything. He had spent every last dollar on buying the land and building what he could. He was still holding down a city job, but it barely covered expenses, let alone the major upgrades required. He was running out of time, energy, and hope, and slowly he began preparing himself for the worst. He started pulling back from Lucky, trying to make the eventual goodbye less painful, but it backfired on both of them. The wolf, confused and heartbroken, sank into depression, and Mike was left sleepless, wondering if his best friend could even survive without him. But then, something amazing happened. A friend commented on one of Mike's videos, explaining the uphill battle he was fighting. And that sparked something big. People began reaching out, asking how they could help. Donations started pouring in. Messages of support flooded his inbox. And then, the miracle, enough money was raised to make every single change that was required. Later, Mike found out that even the inspector had quietly contributed. When the official returned to the sanctuary and saw the upgraded space, he smiled. Everything was perfect. Everything was legal. And finally, he could say the words Mike had longed to hear. "You get to keep your wolf." Mike was overjoyed. His supporters were ecstatic. And Lucky? He was just happy to have his human back. Full-time. With the paperwork finally in order, Mike could focus on the fun stuff. Bonding, training, and spending real time with his beloved wolf again. But that wasn't the end of the story. In fact, it was just the beginning. His experience with Lucky had opened his eyes and his heart to something bigger. There were so many animals out there that needed help. And now, Mike had the license, the space, and the determination to do more. He started selling Lucky-themed merchandise to help fund the sanctuary. People donated. They wanted to be a part of something meaningful. And they trusted Mike to use their support for good. More than that, they trusted his gift with animals. It didn't take long before the calls started coming in. Wolves, wolf dogs, hybrids. Any animal in need found its way to Mike. And of course, he said yes, every single time. It wasn't just wolves either. Lucky's new siblings included all kinds of rescued creatures, like wild boars who loved nothing more than a good belly rub. The videos Mike shared of these interactions continued to melt hearts everywhere. And Lucky? He finally had playmates. Not quite his size, maybe, but close enough. All of it, everything traced back to that single moment. That day when Mike looked into a sad little cage on the back of a truck and saw not just a puppy, but a soul worth saving. That was the day he found not just a best friend, but his purpose. Since then, Mike has changed countless lives and he's not stopping. His dream now is to build larger habitats, especially for Lucky, so he can live as close to the wild as possible, without ever being truly wild again. He wants to give his wolf freedom without the danger, love without limits. Until that dream becomes a reality, Mike continues to give every animal in his care all the love they deserve, every single day. His life may have started in the city with what he thought was a regular dog, but it became something so much more, because the bond between man and animal, that never changed, and it never will. Did you enjoy the story? Would you have helped little Lucky too? Let us know in the comments. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Would you want to live in a sanctuary surrounded by animals? Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you in the next video. Have a beautiful day. Wolf Face Red Heart.